Hello, welcome to All Walks of Life. Let's Inspire. I'm your host, Peter Sobey. Thank you, Graciela, for that applause right there. And welcome to another episode. This is episode 14 of All Walks of Life. And All Walks of Life is a show where I tap into people from all walks of my life who inspire me. Sometimes they're people that I don't even know that I've reached out to and have agreed to do the show, much to my happiness, who inspire me. My guest today is one of the nicest, coolest, intelligentest, and funniest people I've had the honor of crossing paths with in my lifetime. His name is Michael Hitchcock, and he's an actor that we all know and love as one of the Christopher Guest players from movies like Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, For Your Consideration, and so many others. He's also a very accomplished writer and producer from shows that you know and love like Glee and My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So many things to talk about with Michael. Also coming up on the show, the segments And Now You Know, the segment Whistles of Wondering, and also the segment Wheels of Wisdom, and the all-new segment within a segment, It's Donut Time.
Wow, that's a lot of segments coming up.
That is a lot of segments coming up, and if you're wondering who that voice is, it's none other than the co-host of the show, the AI intelligent robot, brought to us by the fine folks over at Microhard Software. It's MHS Ultraseismic Megatroid 3033. Say hello, MHS Ultraseismic Megatroid 3033.
Well, hello, Peter.
Hello.
Hello, fireside audience.
Oh, very nice of you. So anyway,
Hello, podcast listeners.
very, very considerate.
And hello, world.
Wow. MHS Ultraseismic Megatroid 3033. That is pretty looming there with your world talk, but okay. So you are here on Fireside. This is All Walks of Life. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Peter Sobey. When I was 19 years old, I dove into a lake that was too shallow and I broke my spinal cord. That was 34 years ago, and here I am on Fireside doing this show. The reason I say that is because, that I even bring up that story, is because it's 34 years now. I've been a quadriplegic all this time, and I love to share this story. A few weeks into the accident, I was laying in this hospital bed in the middle of the night. It was called a striker bed. I'm turning back and forth, rocking in this bed. There's this weird little black and white TV playing The Swinger with Anne Margaret on it, this totally weird psychedelic 1963 film that I'm only getting to see 30 seconds of every time I turn. But anyways, I had a conversation with myself that night, and it was very informative for my entire life. I said to myself, Peter, make yourself a promise. I'm like, okay, well, what's the promise? And I'm like, Peter, promise yourself you're never going to look back and be depressed. You're never going to look back and be angry. You're never going to look back and say, what if? What if I didn't dive into that lake? You're going to promise not only those things, but promise that you'll always look forward. And I agreed to that promise. And that's kind of like the mottos that I live my life by. Not only that promise, but it's not just enough to survive every day of life, but you need to thrive every day in life and always look forward. I want to know where I'm going to be right after this show. Where am I going to be tonight? Where am I going to be next week? What's going on next year? How about in 5 years? I want to know. And I hope all of you listening want to know the same things about your lives.
Wow, that's a lot of inspiration.
Well, well, thank you, MHS Ultra Seismic Megatroid 3033. It is a lot of inspiration, and I feel that this show is kind of like an amalgamation of my life. I think that this show will become my legacy, talking to other inspiring people. And now's the time of life where I'm thinking about legacy, and I feel that it is my obligation to share and to inspire others. So thank you for indulging me in that little bit of spiel. And one little thing this week was the midterms elections. Here in all walks of life, we don't get too political or anything like that, but I do hope that everyone listening here, watching here, whether you're watching live, whether you're watching the replay, watching on YouTube, watching on Facebook simulcast, listening to the podcast at a later date on Spotify or Apple or iHeartRadio, all those great podcast audio listening spots. I hope you participated in your right to vote. Hey, MHS Ultra Seismic Megatroid 3033. I know that you didn't vote because you're just an AI intelligent robot co host of all walks of life.
Host Peter Sobe.
Yes.
I am not at all concerned with voting. My
Okay.
main objective is world domination.
There you go again. MHS Ultra Seismic Megatroid 3033. That is so foreboding, but I will say it's a very admirable goal. And it's great having goals and reaching for goals. That sort of attitude is incredible. And speaking of incredible, let's get to our guest for today's show. An extraordinary and incredibly talented individual. His name is Michael Hitchcock. Hi,
Hello
Michael.
there.
Welcome to
Hi.
All Walks of Life.
How are you, Peter?
I am good. It is so good to see you.
And you. And
And
here we
why
are.
am I thinking this way?
I don't know.
It's been a long time, but first of all, I want to say, Michael Hitchcock. You might have been listening to my intro there, and I talked a lot about my legacy and such. And I would like to share with you right now, Michael Hitchcock. I want this show, this interview with Michael Hitchcock, to be the Michael Hitchcock legacy interview that people will look back on with awe and wonderment about this incredible man they are getting the opportunity to know better here today. Michael Hitchcock, are you ready for a legacy interview?
Yeah, I think I am.
I am too.
Let's do it. Legacy.
MHS Ultra Seismic Megatroid 3033 is ready for a legacy show. We might even go over an hour, who knows, because there's so much to talk about. This is going to be like your Time Magazine Man of the Year interview, Michael. This is one that's going to go, they're going to put the recording and they're going to print out a transcript and it will go with you in your coffin on your deathbed. That's how incredible this interview is going to be.
Well,
Ah,
I can't wait. Here, let's see what happens.
and actually, I was going to get started with the questions. However, my co host here is bumping me in the arm.
Host Peter Sobe.
Yes.
May I be so bold to ask Michael Hitchcock the first question?
Wow. I mean, usually I don't like to relinquish that, but I also give credit when my co host takes initiative. Michael, if it's okay with you,
Sure, I'm scared of your AI, but let's see what happens.
Hello, Michael Hitchcock. Here
Hello.
is my question for you. Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one of my favorite TV shows. What's it like working with Adam Sandberg? And why did you decide to just keep your own name to play a fellow detective on the show?
Oh boy.
Oh no, that AI
M-
doesn't understand. They borrowed my
MHS
name.
MHS Ultraseismic Megatroid 3033. Michael Hitchcock is a character on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, played by
That's
Dirk
right.
Blocker. The
Ugh.
real Michael Hitchcock is right here, right now, in the flesh. And plus, isn't that, I don't know, but Dirk Blocker is like the most non-porn porn star name I think I've ever heard.
I think of Dan Blocker, who used to be on Bonanza. So
Oh
yeah,
gosh,
but Dirk Blocker apparently is a very nice person. I've never met him. I think we follow each other on Twitter.
that's funny.
But yeah,
Has anyone ever said like, "Oh, I love you" on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, just thinking that they hear the name Michael Hitchcock? And
no, that hasn't happened. But it has been a little. I've always thought like, huh, that's a bit odd that that's a character name on a very popular TV show. But whatever. It's a good show. So there you have it.
yeah,
Host Peter Sobe.
yes,
Your
MHS.
discussions about porn limits your expansion for growth.
Oh, excuse me.
Michael Hitchcock, did you sue the New York Police Department for bogarting your name?
Oh man,
No, I didn't.
he's, he is like burying a dead horse here. I'm telling you.
Yeah, no, I did not. I didn't even think about that. In fact,
MHS
yeah,
Ultra.
why would I sue them? It's I would have to sue like Hollywood.
Yeah. It doesn't. MHS Ultra Size and Megatroid 3033. Why in the wide world of litigation do you even care about someone's personal life and why they would host someone? You're just the AI robotic co-host of all walks of life.
I will answer you in one word.
Okay.
Host Peter Sobe.
Yes.
World domination.
Yeah, he keeps threatening you with that.
You keep saying that, MHS Ultra Seismic Megatroid 3033. Should we be afraid?
No, Peter. You shouldn't be afraid at all.
Uh-oh.
Okay. All right, that was pretty foreboding. I think I'm going to put a cork in my coast for a minute here, Michael.
Well, yeah, he needs to get his facts straight.
I know. For an AI intelligent robot, I'm going to have to contact those fine people at Microhard Software and see if we could do a little tweaking.
Exactly. It's not
Anyways,
been a good week for that or cryptocurrency.
yes. Yeah, there's something about the internet lines, for lack of a better word, that internet thing that is going on in the world. So,
Yep.
Michael,
Yes, sir.
welcome to All Walks of Life.
Thank you,
It
Peter.
is
Thank you for
really,
having me.
it's really good to see you. And I will say see you again, but we only briefly crossed paths way back in the mid 90s. And neither of us really kind of remember what it was, but I'm pretty sure, as you suggested, I was getting my start in development back in those days, and you were a writer. In fact, you were kind of like, if I remember correctly from my development days back there, you were kind of like a hot commodity, like an up and coming guy, because you wrote Where the Day Takes You.
That's right. Yeah, I did Where the Day Takes You, which was a drama about street kids in Los Angeles. And it was, yeah, that's right. And then after that, I've done nothing but write comedy. So But
Yeah, it's so funny. Like you did that, and I'm almost like, even though my development days started in '94 and '95, but I'm sure that that at that time that was the last thing you had written when well, at least that was produced when I started development. So I'm thinking that it must have been that red hot movie you wrote after that, Problem Child 3, that caught my attention.
it could be. I mean, it was everyone was talking about it.
Yeah. Actually, I've got a really dear friend, Eric Edwards, who played like the bully in that movie, the big bully kid.
Great. I wasn't on set very much on that. I went maybe once or twice, but yeah.
But then, what about, do you remember, did you have any other specs then that you were sending out? Do you recall at all?
I sent out a spec called Serious Trouble that became House Arrest,
Okay.
which was another movie I wrote. Um, so that would have maybe been it. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it was Serious Trouble they came across. But House Arrest, MGM Studios, Jamie Lee Curtis, Kevin Pollak,
Yeah,
star studded cast,
it had a good
Wallace
cast. Jennifer
Shawn.
Tilly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jennifer Tilly, Wallace Shawn, Ray Walston, Colleen Camp, Jennifer Love Hewitt,
that's right.
Christopher
All of them.
McDonald. Wow.
Yeah.
And then there's just this like little gap all the way to the year 2000. And the next thing I see on the list is Satan's School for Girls.
Yeah, that was supposed. I got roped into that. It was an Aaron Spelling project. I got roped into that because I think originally it was pitched to me that they were going to do a comedy, and then I learned later it was not a comedy. It was serious, and by that time, I think I'd already agreed to do it. Um, so then, yeah, that I did that,
I'm
and
almost
that
wondering
starred.
too, Shannon Doherty.
That's right,
It almost
and
makes
that
you
was
wonder.
shot in Canada, so I never met any of the actors on that one.
Oh wow, that's too bad. I'm sure you would have loved to have met Shannon back then.
Yeah, it'd have been fun. I did meet
I'm
Mr.
almost
Spelling.
I'm almost wondering, like with all of her clout, if she was like, I don't want this to be a comedy. With all her Beverly Hills 90210 clout.
I don't think there was any doubt that it was not a comedy when you read it. But yeah.
So to wrap up our little history, what I do completely remember is that we broke bread together once or twice at a little cafe on Ventura Boulevard called Coogee Bay Cafe.
Is it still there?
No, no, it's been gone since, like, I think maybe 9/11 ish time she left. It was like, I forgot where she was from, but it was run by this woman from like Denmark or Netherlands or something like that. She was a wonderful
Mm,
woman. And I also remember that Hector Elizondo was always in the back. It was kind of like his office back there at Coogee Bay Cafe,
wow.
kind of
Yeah,
speaking of signs of.
I don't remember ever seeing him there, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. So anyway, all of that just to say, this is the first time Michael and I are seeing each other. I'm pretty sure since meeting at a Ventura Boulevard cafe, what's 20 years ago, something
Quite a
like that.
while.
Yeah, 25 years ago. Crazy. So double thank you for coming on the show when I reached out to you. I'm sincerely very grateful.
Well, that's very nice of you, Peter, to have me. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And before we go on with my first question, we do have to pay the bills here a bit. And I would like to thank the sponsor for today's show, Kmart. It's Kmart. Come on. Kmart's got what you need. It's Kmart. Come on. Maybe you want a little decoration for your office desk. Kmart's got the Cheech and Chong talking bobbleheads. Hey, how about a turtleneck style dickie? Look at the size of my dickie. Or maybe when your grandma's feeling cold, you need to get her a warm whiskers neck wrap. You can wrap this kitty in a microwave for aromatic warmth for grandma, or
Put it in the freezer when Grandma needs an invigorating ice bath. Meow. Hey, Kmart's got you covered. It's Kmart. Come on.
It's Kmart. Come on. Thank you for sponsoring this hour of All Walks of Life Kmart. And now back to the show. So, Michael, that was a
Yes, sir.
deep cut. That was a
Which
deep
part?
cut.
Kmart, come on, or my credits?
So, so here's the thing. I've been doing this Kmart Come On bit for like my whole show. It's been like something in my life for a while. And when I was kind of like going back and looking at your stuff, I realized that I don't know why. I don't. Maybe I didn't realize it back at the time, but one of my favorite things from Mad TV was the Lillian Werner show. And
Yeah.
little did I know that my Kmart Come On, where I highlight three very different items that you can get at a Kmart, is kind of, Lillian Werner ish, if you will. And
It is a
furthermore,
little.
and of course, we know that Kmart is not even a company anymore. So it's interesting that they would sponsor this show, but that's their prerogative to spend marketing money for a store that doesn't exist. But I don't know if you noticed, but all three of those items were an homage to you and the Lillian Werner sketch.
Well, that's I yeah on Matt TV I played the I was sort of the sidekick to the
Yeah,
host of a fake game show called the Lillian.
you're kind of like the hype man.
I was sort of the hype man, and it's loosely based on the real catalog, Lillian Vernon, which is a real catalog that has a lot of that stuff in it.
Mm.
And we played with that, but I never wrote any of those sketches. I was just in them, so it was even though I was a writer on Mad TV. Yeah, and that all came about because during before when sketches are getting chosen, you read them out loud. It's called a table read. And for those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with that, and they needed someone to do a narration, a voiceover, so I agreed to do that. And then someone thought, well, those voiceovers are so long. Maybe the person should be on camera, and that's how I ended up being on camera for those things. And we
Because
did
you were just
quite a few of
you were
them.
a
We did
writer,
about eight
right?
of them, didn't we?
Yeah, there was a lot, and you
There were
weren't
quite a
necessarily
few.
a performer, right?
No, I was hired as a writer, yeah. So I very seldom showed up on the show on
But
camera, but that was one of them. Yeah,
right, and you kind of had like the Simeon Dyson, that was his name. And you kind of had
that's
like
right.
the redheaded fro.
Yeah, I had
So
like
anyway,
curly hair.
yeah,
Yeah, and
very
they
hype.
on purpose they would put me in. I wore a Borat, that green thing one time, the thong thing, and another time I was shirtless and they made my nipples look huge. I mean, they did everything to make me look as stupid as possible, and I'm still kind of angry at all of the writers for that. But we had fun doing them. It was like a fever dream doing those sketches because they went on forever, and then they would cut them down to a proper length. But yeah,
That's funny. And I had just
yeah,
assumed that you must have had a hand in writing them because I was like, oh,
not a
Michael
word.
wrote something for himself that he had to be in as one of the writers.
Nope, it was just the opposite of that. It was like, can you read the voiceover at a table read? And then they thought, oh boy, that's too long. And they said, well, he did a good job doing that, so we'll just put him on camera. So it was all a big mistake, really.
That is funny.
Yeah.
Speaking of big mistakes,
Same
one of
school for
the
girls.
one of the core questions, you know, everyone when we think of you, we think of comedy, but one of the core questions that we ask here on All Walks of Life, I don't know who we is, MHS Ultraseismic Megatroid and myself ask, is what was one of the biggest obstacles you've ever faced in your life, Michael, and how did you overcome it? We're diving deep out of the gate,
Yeah.
baby.
I'd say the biggest obstacle I had growing up was low self-esteem, and it took years to overcome it. Um, I think a while, for many, many years, like high school years, I kind of hid it behind a facade of, being funny or what have you. But it took a lot of introspection to sort of get past it and to go like, I'm
Wow.
good enough. Yeah. I think that was, and therapy. I think for those of you who've never had therapy, I highly recommend it if you can find somebody that you can afford. Um,
And you
but
even
yeah,
were you saw a therapist back then in high school, back
no,
in the
no, no,
60s?
no, no. It was until I was a young adult. Yeah, but yeah,
Gotcha. And
yeah, and
so
a lot of that stemmed from, uh, I realized at some point that I like guys more than girls, and back when I was growing up, that was a not a good thing at all. And so
mm,
it sort of like the whole world was saying that's wrong, it's dirty, it's sinful, all of it. And so it wasn't just like, oh, I have zits on my face or something like that. It was, a secret that I had to keep. And it took a very long time to accept that in myself and to say like it's not only okay, it's good, and it's not a bad thing. And that took a lot of therapy. And it also depends. I mean, I'm older, so I went from growing up in the '70s where there were no gay role models at all. There was no one. No one in my school was. I went to a school with 5,000 kids, and as far as I know, no one was out. The one person I thought might be gay killed himself. Um, so it was, there were no. It was not only no role models. It was it just was a bad thing. And then when the '80s rolled around, we had AIDS, so there was one more reason to like, oh boy, now it's going to kill you. So it took a lot of digging in and figuring things out.
so
So yeah.
when
So how about that? We're going to dive right in, Peter
that
Sobe.
is a couple of pretty huge obstacles.
Yeah,
So do you think that your the whole fact of of growing up realizing that you liked boys and not girls had to do also with kind of being not comfortable and stuff like that, but what was there a moment, when did you how did you overcome it outside of later having therapy as an adult?
I
You
think I
obviously
think
then went to
um,
college.
yeah, I mean times changed. Things slowly got better. Um, People slowly came out of the closet. Some, up until the 1980s, up until I think 1981, 1982, it was considered a psychological defect, and it wasn't until then that psychiatry literally changed their definition of it. That it was considered, um, up until then, like something that needed to be corrected. That it was a mental illness. So it took a long time for even you know the medical institutions to change. So as
Mm.
things like that started to slowly change, it definitely helped. Um, and part of it was, well, maybe it's a phase, maybe I'm bisexual, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and yeah, it's sort of an ongoing process. If
What about with your parents back then? How was it with them?
didn't talk about it, not until much later. Yeah, it just wasn't talked about. Or it was like, when are you going to marry? Or how about that girl? Or all of that stuff. All of that was happening. And for a long time, I wanted that to happen. I wanted all of that. I mean, who wouldn't? So yeah, it was a real process. And going to therapy and going, well, I don't know exactly what's happening, and like trying to figure it out. And then having a therapist that was like, well, it's okay, you know, because I think originally I went to one connected with the church I went to, and they weren't even like psychiatrists. They were just like people that went to the church, and they weren't going to say it was okay. And so slowly but surely you had to go like, well, this is not working for me, and what if they're not right? You know what I mean? Sometimes people give you bad advice, or the church is wrong, I believe. Um, so you have to kind of like go like, well, if that's not working for me, then I need to get out. Yeah.
Did you
So
have like? Do you remember like having the conversation where you admitted it to your parents, or
yeah,
did it
we
just
had
kind
that.
of like?
We had it. I had it with my mom, and she was crying. And at one point, she said, which makes me laugh now, but it was she was like, "Well, I'll always love you." She goes, "But I will never march in a parade." And, and even then, I thought that was kind of funny. But and she never did march in a parade, but
That's funny.
she ended up being very supportive. So and dad was supportive too. But it took a while, and yeah. So and I know everybody that was in my position, especially back then, we all have kind of similar stories about that. So um, it's yeah, it
So I
takes a lot of work.
and you grew up in like Ohio and Illinois, like pretty
That's
blue
right.
collar areas that are kind of like, like I
Yeah,
know that even me growing up, I always knew I wanted to move to California. And my parents were always like, why do you want to go to the land of fruits and nuts? It's
right.
like,
Yeah,
mom,
I mean, all
dad.
that stuff gets said, and it's it takes. I mean, back then, who was there? There was Liberace, who literally sued the National Enquirer because they insinuated he was gay. He sued that he wasn't, and he won.
Wow.
He won that lawsuit. And there was like Paul Lind on, Hollywood Squares, but he never admitted anything. It was all just innuendo. So there was nobody. There was no one to turn to, and it was all just a big joke. So everything, was fought hard, and many people were all standing on somebody else's shoulders, if you will, that came before us and did the dirty work. Um, and that's the one thing they say about like Stonewall riots. The people that rioted that night, they had nothing to lose. They were street kids and drag queens and people that had been arrested a million times, and they were just tired of it. And
Yeah.
that's why they rioted that night. It's like, well, throw me in jail. I've been there before, and we're not going to take it anymore. So yeah, it's long, hard gains.
And speaking of standing on shoulders, so in hindsight, do you wish you had the conversation with your parents earlier? And I ask that in the spirit of, even though today's day and age has changed a lot, and obviously, you know, everybody in the world, I would like to think, is a bit more, is way open to it. We've got red people that maybe aren't, but what advice do you have for like a young teenage Michael Hitchcock right now that is struggling with the
Um,
conversation
I,
with the.
I think you are loved to that person. You are loved. You will find your tribe. Um, I would tell anybody come out when you're ready. I don't believe in somebody forcing somebody out. There's many circumstances on why people don't come out until you know they're ready. But to know that they are loved and that they have community. It may not be in their town. They may have to get out of their town, but there are places to go, numbers to call, Instagram accounts to follow. There's all of that now, so that's good. But in the last couple of years, I think we've taken major steps back with all this crazy. They're shutting down like drag queens, like as if they're the big problem in the world. They're doing that with like CRT, and like they don't want to teach so much about people of color's history. They're doing that the same thing with like you can't mention gay until like I don't know seventh grade or some crazy thing in some states. It makes no sense, and transphobia is huge right now. So it's for all the gains that have happened, people are pushing back again. So it's
Right.
not a great time unless you live in a city, probably. So
That
anyway,
is a very good point. It's a very good
yeah.
point. I'm only just like hoping that, once, I don't know why I can't get political or whatever, but I'm hoping that since we didn't have the red wave that was expected this past week, I'm hoping there will be a bigger and bigger pushback of that 33% of the country that is just insane and wacko, and the
Yeah.
people that are doing these things that you're talking about. Like I hope that we can all rise up and quelch their desire to turn back the clock.
Yeah, I think people are sort of afraid of what they don't know. And that's why I think it is good, especially in, let's say, the LGBTQ community, to come out and say, like, this is what I am. And I think if more people do that, then it's like, oh, well, they're not that scary, or, I mean, whatever it is. Um, so I do think in that regard, the more that we can all have conversations, no matter what minority someone may think, they fall into, um, it's good to have discussions and go like, this is me, this is where I am, this is what I believe. We may not see eye to eye, but that's who I am. And now tell me about you. And everybody's got a story.
Yeah,
There's reasons why people are the way they are. And there's just not that they're hateful. There's usually something else behind it. Um, so if I've learned anything, that's part of it.
that's like an incredible perspective to have. That's why you're so inspiring and why you're here on the show, All Walks of Life. Let's
Well,
inspire.
we didn't talk about that. So this is all this is news to you, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, and thank you for sharing your story. This wasn't even
Yeah.
a topic on my list of questions or anything. So I'm very grateful for you sharing your story. And I'm sure when people listen to this now or on the replay or in the future, I think a lot of people will definitely benefit what you've just said. And I know I'm just really inspired, even just by your reaction to those people and saying that, we almost need the same approach with them that we're expecting of ourselves. Like they've got a story. There's obviously a reason why the way they are. Maybe a kind of a conversation can be started, a dialogue, and we can open
Right.
minds.
And that's why, I mean, with everything, it's nice when people kind of share their truth, I think, because then we have a dialogue, and you need dialogues. I think we're kind of now in a boat, without getting political. Everyone's sort of in their own bubble. You're either watching MSNBC or Fox News, and nobody's watching the other. And so everyone's preaching to their own choir, and that's not good either. So, um, yeah, it's, but that's one thing I like about living in Los Angeles, and I'm sure you'd agree too. It's so diverse that you can't help but run into people that are not like you, or
Absolutely.
not like me, and we're kind of forced to talk to each other at times, which is great. And when I grew up, where I grew up in Ohio, as much as I liked being a kid there, everybody was like Protestant. Like being Catholic was weird, let alone like there's no Jewish people. At the time, there were not that many people of color living there. So it was so homogenous that, you just think, well, that's how everybody is. And of course, it wasn't like that at all once you venture outside the city limits.
Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in the suburbs of Chicago, but my parents were
Hmm.
total blue collar factory workers, old school, Eisenhower Republicans, and you just didn't talk about certain things, like
Right,
yeah, it was
right.
a different time and different people, but I'm saying I feel you because I was in that same area, and yeah, it was probably not an easy place at all to be for someone going through what you were going through. So I'm glad you're here in Los Angeles now.
Yeah, well, I am too. I'm glad I'm here. But everybody's got their journey, and I think the older I get, it's like nobody's got it that easy. Obviously some people do, but even like I was reading, Matthew Perry has a book out now about his life, and you're thinking like the richest guy, the most famous guy, you think he's got everything, you know, on the world by the whatever that expression is, and what was really going on is just like crazy. And what a life he's had, that he's been struggling all this time, and you know very, very, so I don't know, you never know what's going on behind closed doors, I guess, is my thing.
Yeah, and I've seen him kind of making the talk show rounds and everything, and he's actually really inspired me to being glad that I'm doing this show, not to make it about me, but everything he's gone through, and especially now he's had all these surgeries, and He
Hmm.
almost died and stuff, but now he's saying like, "Hey, it's my job to go out and educate people and to help people that went through what I went through." And I
That's
think it's
right.
amazing, kind of making it his mission to say, "Hey, if you're about to pick up a drink and you need something or someone, I'm here." Like,
Yeah. And I know you said at the beginning too that you after your accident you were like, I vowed that I would never, you know, waste a day, regret a day, um, feel sorry for myself, and all of that. And I think that's so noble. And yet, I think too, when people have a bad day, that's okay. It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to struggle. Um, Obviously, the trick is to find someone to help you because you can't do it by yourself.
yeah,
It's just too hard. Um, and that's why, find the good friend, or a hotline, anything. But because we all struggle and we all have bad days, and it's okay, I guess, is my motto on some of that. And if you find when we find ourselves slipping into like a depression or something, then it's like, oh boy, let's figure this out. You know.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
Wow. No, and you're right. Like I do kind of like just wrap it up in a nutshell there. But yeah, I have many days that are not good days, or I'm struggling with everything and cursing under my breath and stuff. But I do kind of pull myself out of it with the thoughts of like always look forward. But I
yeah.
suppose too, like
Or
some of it, like not looking back, could be a little bit of that growing up in the '70s and '80s, and like I was raised with like therapists are quacks, and stuff like that. Like you just put it in a
yeah, I
plastic.
don't know if I was. I don't know if I was raised with therapists or quacks. I don't remember that. I guess I was a little bit because they were called shrinks and quacks and all of that stuff. But it got to the point at one point where it's like, well, I got to talk to somebody about all this stuff. I can't just not talk. And yeah, so it does help with
How
all of
old
that.
were you when
But
you
yes,
found that? How old were you when you found
when
that
I went to
therapist?
therapy, probably 24, maybe, probably around and then.
Did you
It was
just
after
ask
college. I
around?
remember that.
Did you just ask around like, hey,
I probably no. I don't think I asked anybody. I think I looked it up. I think I just like looked up therapists.
yellow
Yeah, I
pages?
don't remember saying. Yeah, I don't remember asking a friend about it. I think I was. I don't think anybody. I don't think I told anybody I was going. I think I just went. But yeah,
I know my friends Michael and Michelle in the audience remember what the yellow pages were. Graciela, you might be a little too young for the yellow pages. They were this thing called a phone book where people listed their names and numbers and sometimes street addresses and businesses would advertise.
it's sort of
Unbelievable.
like Google. It's sort of like Google,
Yeah.
except you'd have to turn a page. Yeah,
Yes. A Google you hold
Google
in
is
your
so much
hand.
easier.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so much more manageable. It doesn't take up room on your
Hmm.
shelf.
That's right.
So if you are just tuning in now, the time is really flying. I do hope, Michael, that you could actually stick around a little longer because there's still so much to talk about. If
Yeah.
you're
Well,
just
hopefully we'll
tuning
talk
in now,
about something besides Problem Child 3.
yes, I know, right? We got to get beyond Problem Child 3 and Satan's School for Girls. So if
That's
you're just
right.
tuning in now, you're watching All Walks of Life here on Fireside. My guest is Michael Hitchcock. If you're watching live or the replay here on Fireside, you'll see there's a fortune cookie in the middle of your screen. And that's where you can look up Michael. We've got his Instagram there at Hitch Michael Instagram.
That's right.
Go check it out and see all the wacky antics of Michael Hitchcock.
Yes. I kind of like Instagram for that. I kind of do an anti Instagram a little bit with, there's always the people that are like on the beach and, all of that stuff. And so sometimes I'll just post a picture of my, some stupid stuffed cat or something. I don't know, something dumb, but just to shake it up a bit.
Totally. And so now that we are moving on from Problem Child 3, let's work backwards a little bit because I love the fact that you come from the lineage of the Groundlings.
Yes, the Groundlings is a sketch improv troupe in Los Angeles, and I was a member of it. And I still go there from time to time and do improv on Thursday nights, and it's fun. It's good times.
How did you get started with the Groundlings?
Somebody recommended that it's a good place to go to learn, well, to study improv, and that improv is a good tool for writers because improv is basically you just have to write on your feet. You're up there, you have to do it. Um, and I thought, okay, that sounds good. And that's sort of, I started taking classes and enjoyed it and kept at it. And that's sort of what happened. And then as time goes on, they have classes for sketch writing and other things like that. And I kind of found my tribe out here in Los Angeles with that organization. And for people outside of LA, it's a pretty good funnel for people that ended up on SNL or Mad TV.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a fun place to go see a show. If you're in LA, they do shows Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is kind of the new kids. So yeah.
Who were some of your favorite people to play alongside back in the day?
Oh man, there were a lot. I Jennifer Coolidge was in my era. Lisa Kudrow, Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry, Chris Kattan, Chris Parnell, Michael McDonald from Mad TV. He was played Stewart, if you remember. He's now a big time director. Tim Bagley, who's right now on Grace and Frankie. Mindy Sterling from the Austin Power movies. Anna Gasteyer from SNL. Cheryl Hines, Kathy Griffin. And before all of us, there were people like Paul Rubens, who was Pee Wee Herman, Cassandra Peterson, who was Elvira. Um, yeah, a lot of people down the list. So those are some of them.
Um, I am getting poked in the side here by my co-host, who thankfully has been quiet through all this. I am very glad,
Yeah,
actually, that he had nothing to interject in the previous conversation. But MHS Ultraseismic Megatroid 3033, you have a question for Michael?
I love improv.
Oh, great.
Michael
good.
Hitchcock, would you do a short improv with me?
Sure, let's do it. Let's see what happens.
Wow.
Incredible. I will start. Ahem. Hello, Pastor. What are you doing here in the frozen food section of this local grocery store?
Ah, I am looking at the fish because I want to feed the hungry.
I find that interesting. I myself am here to study the human form as to better accomplish my goal of world domination.
Yes, you talk about that quite a bit. Quite a bit. Maybe
Oh,
just start with baby steps and take over a block or two.
MHS Ultraseismic Megatroid 3033, you have one of the best improvers in America here, and that's your improv with him?
Oh,
Host Peter Sobe. That is all I got.
Well,
well, fair
that
enough.
was fun. And I'm glad that we learned that you were at the grocery store to get some fish
That's right, to feed the hungry.
and that you weren't there for world domination.
Domination. Yeah, I should have said that first.
So, Michael Hitchcock,
Yes, sir.
it is now time for a segment on this show that we call.
And now you know.
Ah,
Oh.
it's time for And Now You Know here on All Walks of Life. So, Michael, did you know the first use of improv?
The first use of improv?
Yes.
Hmm. Let me think. I'm going to say for like police interrogation.
Ooh, very interesting. Well, the earliest well documented use of improvisational theater in Western history is found in the Adeline farce of 391 BC. From the
Wow.
16th to 18th centuries, commedia dell'arte performers improvised based on a broad outline in the streets of Italy. Crazy, huh?
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I like the. I didn't know that. I like that. Well, improvisation is kind of making things up as you go along. So,
Yeah.
kids do it every day. Like when you're playing out with your friends and playing cops and robbers or whatever. That's improvisation. And weirdly,
It
I was
is.
also taught just life in general is improvisation because when you go in, to the store and you're looking for a sweater, you don't plan out everything you're going to say, and you have absolutely no idea what they're going to say either. So, we're always improvising. We just don't know
That's a really good point. I like that.
it.
More inspiration here on All Walks of Life. Let's inspire. I love it.
Well, it takes less of the
So,
pressure off.
yeah. So, Michael Hitchcock,
Did you know?
did you know about the origins of popcorn? I asked you to fill out
Ooh,
5 things that you love, and one of them was popcorn.
that's right.
Did you know about the origins of popcorn?
Hmm. Like where it started? I think I've heard about it, but I don't know. I don't know where it started. I would assume with Native Americans, but I'm not sure.
Well, popcorn is so ancient that archaeologists have actually found popcorn fossils.
Ooh,
But that being said, for the modern day popcorn that we know and love, Charles Crater of Chicago is often credited as the modern inventor of popcorn, thanks to his invention of the mobile popcorn cart in the 1880s.
well, thank you, Charles Crater. I didn't know that. Another good reason that Chicago is a good city.
Yeah, like I had no idea that Chicago, well, I knew that Chicago was the origins of popcorn, but now
I
maybe
didn't
our
know that.
audience knows that.
By the way,
And
if
finally,
anyone is ever in, by the way, can I add something? If
yeah,
anyone's ever in
please.
Chicago O'Hare, they have amazing popcorn in some of the little stands as you go around. I think one of them is Nuts on Clark. They
Oh,
have
nothing
obviously
is
they have
so
nuts
good.
too, but the Nuts on Clark popcorn is delicious.
It
Yeah.
is.
And what is
I
that? What is the
believe,
famous one with the you get it in a can? Oh, I've given it
yeah,
as gifts before. I can't think of the name of it right at the top of my
I
head.
know what you're thinking of, and I can't think of it, but it's like the most,
Oh, it's so delicious. I call it shame corn because I eat so much of it if I get it. It comes in a big barrel and it's like,
yeah,
you know, it's like caramel popcorn and cheese popcorn together.
yeah, like cheese popcorn. Oh man,
Ooh,
that
it's
is
so
so.
good.
I am drooling.
Me too.
Michael Hitchcock.
Yes.
Did you know?
You like seeing movies in movie theaters. Do you
Hmm.
know what the first movie theater was?
The very first one, like a Nickelodeon, you mean? Like where they hang up a sheet in like a
Yeah,
department store or something like that, or a building?
you're right around it.
Yeah, I would assume it would be that, or it would be the little machine that you looked in and you cranked for like a nickel.
Well, in the
Um,
spirit of the first movie theater, which would be exclusively devoted to showing movie pictures,
mhm.
was called the Nickelodeon. And it opened on June 19th, 1905 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And
One
the
more,
theater,
yeah.
it was a creation of a gentleman named Harry Davis, and John P. Harris, and they moved 96 seats into an empty store on Smithfield Street, transforming it into the first theater. The name, the Nickelodeon, was based on the cost of admission to the theater, a nickel, and the Greek word for theater, Odeon, Nickelodeon.
Nice. Ooh.
And the first show, the first films that were shown there, starting on that day, June 19th, 1905, were Poor But Honest and The Baffled Burglar.
I wonder if we can find Poor But Honest on like YouTube. It might be there.
Totally. It really makes me want to see those things.
Yeah, I have
So,
no interest in seeing The Baffled Burglar, not at all. But Poor But Honest, sign me up.
so Michael Hitchcock and the Fireside audience, or YouTube audience, or Facebook audience, or podcast listener audience.
Did you know these things? Maybe you did, but if you didn't, and now you know.
And that was the And Now You Know segment here on All Walks of Life on Fireside. So,
I
Michael Hitchcock,
enjoyed it. Yes, sir.
I appreciate your time, and we're going to go way over if that's okay with you.
Well, it
It's
depends
been
how much. What's way over? Like till 8 at night?
like 9:45 p.m. I'm
Oof.
thinking.
Oh
I'm
boy.
sure that
All right.
Michael and Michelle Graciela, the others down there, will be game for that. No, I'm just talking like 15 minutes.
Yes, of course. Let's do it.
So this is going to be kind of like speed round. I am gonna I am gonna step the audience through your career. I'm gonna name off a project and just tell us, like, a couple of quick thoughts. That the first things that come to your head.
Okay.
So first of all, as the writer Michael Hitchcock, I'm wondering if you can channel Fritz Gordon. Is he inside there somewhere?
No.
Is this one of those deep dives? Fritz Gordon was the name you used on the Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 screenplays.
Hmm. I don't think that's me.
Then they have like a wrong Michael Hit. Were you in the movie?
Hmm.
Wow, you should check out your IMDb then. There is a very funny
Okay.
credit.
All right.
So we've already hit on Where the Day Takes You and Problem Child 3 and Satan's School for Girls. As an actor, there's a little cult classic documentary you were involved in. I hope you were involved in this and that it's not a wrong credit. It was actually a favorite of mine back in the day that came right on the heels of Spinal Tap, but was 3 years before Waiting for Guffman, called The Making of And God Spoke.
Yes, I was in that. And yeah, it was a mockumentary about the basic premise of it was these producers had a pretty big budget and they were going to make the Bible into a big blockbuster movie, and they ran out of money basically after filming the Garden of Eden scenes, and then everything else had to be done on a nickel and dime budget. And it's a funny film. I don't know if
And
it's
you played
streaming anywhere or not. I played
yeah,
Bob, the assistant director on it, and it was really fun to do. We had a good time.
I love that movie back in the day because, like, to this day, Spinal Tap is, one of my top three favorite movies. So when that came out, I was like, I love that as well. And then, of course, in my top 10 lies the next film in 1996. You filmed it before then, but 96 was a big year for you, starting with Waiting for Guffman.
Yes, that was Christopher
How,
Guest directed that, and
yeah, how did you get involved? How did you become a Christopher Guest player?
well, Christopher Guest. I think my agent at the time recommended me to him, and he came and saw me at the Groundlings, and I was performing improv there, and I didn't know he was in the audience, so I wasn't nervous. And I got to meet him. I went in for a meeting, and he told me they were going to do a little movie about community theater. And I grew up doing community theater in the Chicago suburbs, a really good community theater called Theater of Western Springs in Western Springs, Illinois. And I found out a couple weeks after my interview I was in the movie, and that's how he. You don't really audition for him; he interviews you. So, and he's a very quiet man. So I remember afterwards thinking, "Oh, I don't know how well that went." He seems so quiet to me, not knowing that that's how he is always. So, yeah, that's how that came about.
Well, it's amazing. I actually met Christopher Guest once, and it was while I was working in development on the 20th Century Fox lot.
Mm.
And his wife was filming a sitcom at the time with Richard Lewis and
Ah.
Michelle Myron, I want to say. Like something like Just the Two of Us or something or another.
Hmm.
But anyway, I just was, at that time soaking up all of Hollywood that I can. So I was going on as many sets as I could. And I'm standing there kind of like on the side stage, like where all the suits were and stuff like that. And like all of a sudden, Christopher Guest is standing right next to me. And this is after, Spinal Tap and Waiting for Guffman and
Princess
like
Bride, maybe.
Princess Bride. Oh my God. I mean, he is like, a comedy legend to me. And even way back then, like now, so many years later, of course, but even way back then, like him, SCTV, and Steve Martin were the comedy bar for me.
Mm.
And, anyways, when I was in community college, I had this communication class, and this woman showed this movie from Canada, and Christopher Guest was in it. And now, this was before I ever knew who Christopher Guest was. And there's a scene where he's in bed with the woman, and she turns to him and he licks her face. And it seems so impromptu. And when I then figured out who Christopher Guest was a couple years later, I could never forget about that movie and that scene. And so I finally turned to him. I'm like, "Hi, like a big fan. How's your day?" And he's like, "It's awful. I was in one of those parking garages and I backed up over one of those spikes, where you're not supposed to back up, and he popped both his rear tires." And I commiserated with him, and I'm like, "Christopher, I gotta ask you this. You were in this made for TV Canadian movie back in like 1986. And there's a scene where you're in the bed with this woman and she turns to you and you lick her in the face." I'm like, "You did that on the spot. That was improv, right?" And he just stared at me for like 30 seconds. So it's like I'm kind of looking up at him. He's looking and he's just like looking at me. After I ask him and I'm looking at him and he's just like, "I don't know what you're talking about." I'm like, "Come on, you're just saying that, right?" He's like, "I have no recollection of that whatsoever." I'm like, "You're playing with me, right? I can't tell. Are you being serious?" And he's just like staring at me. So I never found out if it was improv or not.
That sounds. Yeah, his sense of humor is very dry, and sometimes you're not sure. Yeah, if it's humor or if he's being real. But yes, that
And
makes
we'll
that.
get to the other Christopher Guest movies, but what your transition going from Waiting for Guffman playing the pharmacist who's obsessed with Corky
Hmm.
to then Best in Show, you were like leading one of the leading roles. Like, what was that when you found out who you would be playing in Best in Show? What was that like for you?
It was a surprise, a good surprise, and especially knowing I'd be husband to Parker Posey, who I was like everyone, I'm a huge fan of her work, and I obviously met her during Waiting for Guffman, but I didn't know her very well, so we became good friends during Best in Show, and we were very high. We play a high strung couple, and with all of his films that is sort of created as you go. So I didn't know going in we would be so high strung. um, and so it just sort of evolved. So it was, yeah, but yeah, it was a huge challenge, but a lot of fun.
And so we're going to kind of be, moving quickly through here. But if I skip any that, were really important to you, just let me know. I'm going ahead to like 1999. And what was it like getting the writing gig on Mad TV? That's like a huge deal.
Um, it was an interesting time because Michael McDonald I knew from the Groundlings, and he recommended me for the job. Um, and I think I went into interview for that job 5 times. So I think by the fifth time I was like, I don't even think I want to go in again. If they, um, I don't know why it's taking so long, but that's just how the process went. Um, and yeah, it it was an interesting gig because we sort of knew where we stood in the world of late night comedy. We knew that SNL, or obviously the Kings, and we were the underdogs, and that was kind of nice because it was a casual writing atmosphere. There were a lot of laughter, a lot of just creative, just freedom there, and I enjoyed that very much, and made many many good friends over there. And I was enthralled with a lot of the cast members. They were excellent, and a lot of them wrote their own material. So, starting with Michael, he kind of started the ball rolling with that. So, a lot of his major characters he wrote himself, and then others followed suit.
What about, were there any sketches? Like, what were a couple that you, were there any like recurring sketches that you were responsible for?
A lot of them. I mean, we kind of worked on kind of all of them at one point or another. The ones I'm more proud of, me and another writer named Jennifer Joyce, we wrote, along with some other writers here and there, we wrote the Abercrombie and Fitch sketches, which actually got mentioned in the Abercrombie documentary that just came out. So that was really fun to see, like them appreciating our, because we hated Abercrombie with a passion, and so we kind of went after them several times, and I'm still proud of those sketches. And then
And
we did
finally,
take ups on High School Musical at the time, and it was called Public High School Musical, and
oh my
those
God,
were
that's
fun to
hilarious.
do. And yeah, there were we had a lot of fun things. Yeah, and most of
Final
them.
Mad TV.
Okay, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go
No,
ahead.
I'm just saying, and there were a lot of characters that we all took turns writing the major characters, depending what they were, and then a lot of times the cast would do them too. So
And the final Mad TV question, was there lots of cocaine in the writer's room like SNL?
no, there was none. There was pizza.
Dang
Um,
it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to burst your bubble on that one. I've never seen any writing job where people did cocaine. So yeah, maybe it's a New York thing, but
Maybe.
yeah,
And it's just stories I've heard. I can't verify that there was cocaine in the Saturday Night Live writing rooms.
yeah, I don't know about that either. But
So,
yeah, Mad TV was pretty
so,
boring in that regard.
and so I did kind of gloss over House Arrest, but that was a pretty big deal, right? To write a movie with the big studio release with big names.
Yeah, it was. The first time I wrote that movie, it was more like, I think it was an R. It was sort of R rated. It was much darker, and then it had gotten some interest and some traction, and then didn't really go anywhere. And I thought, well, let me take another crack at it and make it more of a family friendly movie. Completely forgetting that no family wants to sit through a movie where the two divorcing couples end up back together again. I should not have. It was a lesson well learned. Like most families were uncomfortable with that at that point. I was thinking, oh, it's like a modern Parent Trap, and then they were. But Parent Trap was in the '60s the first time around, and I know they did it again with Lindsay Lohan, but it was like this one. Yeah, it was. Thinking back, maybe divorce was not the way to go for that particular problem. Why? And they locked their parents in the basement, which a lot of parents weren't too keen on either. So, but it weirdly had like some reviews just awful, and then other people liked it okay. So it kind of just depended which one it was. But for the most part, the critics were not kind to that film. But it was fun to make it.
that the experience was fun. That's great, and it was
Yeah,
also your first time. You probably didn't work with her directly, maybe, but your first time working with Jennifer Love Hewitt, and then as an actor, boom, you're in Heartbreakers working with J Love
Jennifer.
again.
That's right. Yeah, it was nice to see her again. Except, and we filmed that. We filmed Heartbreakers in Florida, all over Florida, and then here in Pasadena too. So I would bump into her all over the place. So yeah, it's kind of fun to see people, grow up. And
Yeah,
I have
totally.
not seen her recently, but every once in a while I'll run into her. So yeah, it's good to see her as always.
All right, now we're gonna start. We're gonna roll through a few. Just kind of say a couple things about each experience. 2003, A Mighty Wind.
Yes, that was a parody about folk singers, and it was my favorite parts of that were working with Bob Balaban, and in true Christopher Guest fashion, our characters, if you see the film, we are kind of at each other a bit. And I had no idea any of that was going to happen. I mean, Christopher didn't tell me any of that was going to happen. And he told Bob to just ask me a million questions about the theater. And it
Oh my
got,
god, I love that scene
and
where he's like, "Is that can those lights fall?" And you're like,
yeah,
"No, they're like, what about that wire?"
yeah, I ended up like giving him a little bop on the head because honestly, I just ran out of, I ran out of patience. But it was, and then everyone laughed, and then the scene cut, and they took out the laughter. But yeah, that was kind of truly how I was feeling at that moment. So because that was an improvised scene. So yeah,
So 2003, a little bit part on Arrested Development.
yeah, I played Ira Gilligan, who was their accountant, who was cooking the books a bit, and I get sent away to Bali, or I go to Bali with all their money and live the good life. But yeah, and I'm dressed as Gilligan from Gilligan's Island in the very last thing, which was kind
Funny.
of fun. Yeah, it was fun to do.
And 2005, playing headmaster Charles Myers in Pretty Persuasion.
Yeah, that was like I just saw the documentary with her. I'm thinking I can't think of the actress's name right off the top of my head. Um, quite eye opening her whole life lately. So, but
The
yeah,
actress from the movie, or
yeah, the actress from the movie
I
who
can't
went
think
out with
of her.
Marilyn Manson for quite a while.
Oh,
Uh,
right. Rose
yeah,
McGowan?
no, not Rose McGowan. I can't think of her
Or not?
name, and I have my phone, so I can't look it up. I'm
Yeah.
recording on my thing, so I
But
apologize.
but you enjoyed the experience.
Oh yeah, it was great. It's always
Um,
fun to be working. It's fun to work.
exactly. Here was a fun show to be on, playing Dr. Matthias in 2005 on Serenity.
Yeah, Dr. Matthias was.
Matthias,
I
excuse
I
me.
meet an entire. I meet. Yeah, I kind of commit Harry Carey on myself at the end because yeah, it was very strange to have a Harry Carey death, and it was quite wild. And we shot it at Universal Studios, most of it. Joss Whedon directed, and it was a great experience. And
Have you
Nathan Fillion, who stars in it, Nathan was like, let's go take, there was a way to get into the tour from where we were filming. There was like a little back door. So we would ride like rides sometimes when we weren't filming. So that was really fun.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean
a
that
little
was
secret door.
it was a chilling scene with I always pronounce his name Chickaway
Chiwetel
Chick,
Ejiofor, yeah.
yeah, like where he's telling you the story of like, you know, where I come from or something, they would commit Harry Carey, and you're like, but I don't have a sword, and he like whips out this long, samurai sword.
Yes. And I had to be on a harness for that, and they kind of would lower me, down. And I have a lot of respect for people on harnesses because all the harness stuff went right up my crotch, and chafed me, and it was you kind of earn your stripes with all of that doing that scene. But it was fun to do. And then they take out the wire later. They erase it.
Right,
But
right.
yeah.
So, moving on to 2006, another Christopher Guest tour de force for your consideration.
John Lake and I played sort of Siskel and Ebert on that, and I dyed my hair bright yellow because my name was sort of I can't remember what my name was, but I was sort of Swiss or something. So I had blonde hair in that movie, and it was silly and fun to do.
Let's move on. This is one I'm really, really curious about. You played a recurring role as Mr. Blanket on the Sweet Life on Deck.
Well, yes, I did. Why are you curious about that? Did you watch it as a kid?
I just think it's hilarious that
I
you got to be on the Sweet Life on Deck. I think it would be awesome being in like a cheesy Disney TV show like that.
it
Or
was I did it as a favor to one of the writers. He said, "Would you come do a thing?" I said, "Sure." And of course, I'm playing like the psychologist who's crazy, one of those kind of things. But I have to say, I was very impressed with the twins. And one of them is now on Riverdale,
Riverdale,
and
right?
yeah, those are like, well, those shows, they know how to bang them out. They were I did 3 episodes, but Disney plays them so much that you would have thought I was on 27 of them. It would be like,
Totally.
"Oh, I saw you on Sweet Life, and I saw you on Sweet Life." I only did 3 of them, but yeah, but
How does, how does that feel too when you've got like such a great diverse resume and people are going, "Hey, I saw you on Sweet Life."
that happened one time when I was kind of at the same time doing a really great fun show called Men of a Certain Age, and I played Scott Bakula's boss. And I remember one day he told me that he saw me on Sweet Life. I thought, "Ooh, okay, well, sorry." Yeah.
That
And
is
I told him, I told him like, "Oh, my friend works on that show," and I, wanted to help him. And he goes, "Well, we all have to work." I thought, "No, I just told you."
that is
But it's
funny.
fun. Those Disney shows, it's sort of like you have to remember you're doing children's theater. And so everything's very presentational, bigger than life. And as long as you embrace it, you're going to have fun. So I embraced it
And
and I had fun.
I love that. And I love that. Like if I were an actor in your position, I would love to do something like that. I think it would be a hoot. So for the audience, you're watching All Walks of Life. My guest is Michael Hitchcock. We're already 15 minutes over, but I want to get through the rest of your credits. So you mind sticking around 10 more minutes, Michael?
Sure.
Because we haven't even gotten to like the big stuff on your writing producing side. But before we get to that, just touch on playing Don Chodolewski in Bridesmaids. You were the
Yes.
gentleman salesman at the ring shop.
Yes. I was Kristen Wiig's boss, and Kristen was a bad employee, and she ends up getting fired. And that was a ton of fun to do. She wrote it with Annie Mumolo, and yeah, it was like a dream job. We had a great time doing it. And the way that movie worked is you would do the scripted version, and then they would hand you some new jokes to do here and there, and then you would also improvise. And then in editing, they would pick what they liked, and so there's a little bit of all of that in there. And
And
then we had a deleted scene where I ended up firing her in the movie, and then the deleted scenes where she came back, and I rehired her and refired her in the same day because she just. But yeah, the movie was way too long, and they cut out a lot of stuff, um, including that scene. But it was super fun to do.
and now my Christopher Guest question for you. I love the moment where the ideal saleswoman comes up and you kind of like touch her and you're like, "Ooh, don't sue me for harassment."
Yeah,
Was
that
that
was
it?
that was that was improvised. Yes. So
That was
yeah.
so funny.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
And then, like, at the end of that scene, you did a callback to your own improvisation. I thought it was brilliant. because
I did.
she
Oh
touches you
yes,
on her set, and
yeah.
you're
We
kind
had
of
a
like,
little thing going. I think maybe we had a little thing at some point that we you don't see, but yeah, I clearly have favorites in that office.
and of course you work with Kristen and um,
Annie,
Annie again in Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar.
that's right. And we did that 2019. It was supposed to be Florida, and we shot it in Cancun, in the off season of Cancun, where it's absolutely. I mean, Cancun is absolutely beautiful, but in August it is hot and humid, and it was so hot, and everyone's having a great time, believe me, but every other sentence was "I'm so hot." And I was wearing a three-piece suit and this kind of pink shirt and a tie, and I was splotching because I was so sweaty. And the way they make it look okay on camera is they just wet it all down. So I was just sort of hot and wet, but it looks on camera, it looks fine. But yeah, but we had fun. It was one of the most sheer fun things to do because we would film and then at night we would meet in a hotel and have some dinner and some drinks and everybody would laugh about the day, and it was just one of those kind of just fun, like almost like being on vacation.
That's funny. And like speaking of sweaty roles, I don't know why I'm not remembering the show, but Michael McDonald directed it, and you played a sweaty guy in a gym that
Yeah,
hug.
nobodies.
Right,
Yeah,
nobody's.
I played a producer, a big time, no, a big time agent, and yes, I sneeze on somebody and all of that, and they think they've got their screenplay ready to go, and then I end up having a heart attack on a treadmill, and so they're back to square one, basically.
The last acting thing that I want to bring up before we talk about your writing and producing Tour de Forces is one of, outside of the Christopher. I mean, every time I see you on screen, it's a joy and a highlight. But one of my favorites outside of the Christopher Guest is definitely, without a doubt, playing Vance on the Vow of Silence episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah, that Curb, which is, I mean, Curb is also an improvised show, but what is fascinating about that show is, let me scoot back a little. Like on the Christopher Guest comedies, they're improvised, but we do have an outline that we see ahead of time. That so we at least know what the scene is about. On Curb, obviously the writers have an outline, but the actors, like me, we have no idea what we're doing until like a minute before the cameras roll. They tell you.
Wow.
So whatever scene it is, it's like, okay, this is what the setup is, and go. And you're like, oh, so there's no time to plan ahead. There's no time to think about it. You just do it. And I found it. I mean, it's really scary, but it was also really like kind of just like great. Let's go. And I knew that my character had a bow of silence, but a shitty one. Like I kind of whisper what I want to talk about. But besides that, I had no idea until the minute we rolled what the scene was about.
Wow, that's
So
so
it was
interesting.
just a challenge. Yeah, it was fun. So yeah.
So, and we there were so many that there's not time to get into Wild Hogs and Pushing Daisies and Men of a Certain Age and Super 8 and Space Force and Black Monday and The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window and The Resort. So many things, because I want to make sure in these last few minutes that we talk about how did you come about to getting involved in being a co-executive producer and writer on Glee, one of the
Well,
biggest shows of the time.
Glee. Season one, I played a character on the show. I played the director of one of the competing choirs in season one, and they liked me. And they decided for the first two seasons, the three co-creators of the show, Ian Brennan, Ryan Murphy, and Brad Falchuk, wrote every single episode. All three of them would write all of them, and they decided
Wow.
after that they needed more of a staff, and they asked me if I wanted to join. And they knew about my writing background before that, and so yeah, that's how I came about. And I was a fan of the show. I knew the characters, and that's how that happened. Yeah,
And then eventually you were elevated to co-executive producer.
that's right. Yeah. So I worked on as a writer. The show went 6 seasons, so started writing on it season three, 3 through 6. Yeah.
And then, when I was a little bit younger, one of my favorite TV shows of all time was incredibly cheesy, but I loved it, and it was always a dream of mine to make a musical TV show. Was Cop Rock, the one season
Oh,
wonder.
I think I saw
I
one episode of that.
Yeah, it was so cheesy and bad, but I just love the idea of these characters breaking into song for no
Mhm.
reason in the middle of scenes. And then along comes Rachel Bloom and my crazy ex-girlfriend. I was over the moon. How did you get involved in that show?
That came about. One of the writers from Glee recommended me for that show, and I met Rachel and I met Aline Brosh McKenna, who were the co-creators of that show, and they'd read samples of mine and everything, and that's how that came about. Um, and Aline, of course, is a very prolific writer, and she's famous for The Devil Wears Prada and 27 Dresses, and just a great writer. And Rachel had done these incredibly clever music videos that became pretty big hits on YouTube, and they had collaborated. And by that time they'd shot the pilot. The pilot was originally for Showtime. Showtime turned it down after it was shot. The CW picked it up, and that's when I came aboard. So yeah, and then I stayed on that for all 4 seasons, and very very collaborative, fun show, great cast, very funny musical videos because it was a musical, and these music video, I mean, the music was sort of in her imagination, Rachel's imagination, um, but they're very very funny. Um, so yeah, it was a great time and a
So that's
great
been
writing team. But we didn't.
Yeah.
The writing team didn't really write the songs except for Rachel and then Jack Dolgen, who was a writer on the show, a very talented writer, and Adam Schlesinger, who wrote That Thing You Do from the movie, the Tom Hanks movie, and he's one of the people from Fountains of Wayne, very famous songwriter. And unfortunately, he died during COVID. Um,
I
but
know
yeah,
that
it
movie.
was, yeah, he's incredibly talented, and it's just a shame that we lost him. But great experience.
This has been quite the over of your entire career. Is there
Certainly was.
anything that we didn't bring up that was such an incredible memory that you want to put a word in on?
No, I think you covered pretty much everything. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And and I do want to wrap up the show, but I'm going to squeeze in one last little segment before we do our final wrap up question. And
It's donut time!
it's donut time.
Oh,
Michael
good.
Hitchcock, what is your favorite donut?
Probably. What are the long ones with maple syrup on them? Or the maple.
Long,
So
Long John with maple syrup.
yeah, probably Long John. I'm so boring. But if I could
Maple
pick
Long
any
John.
one of them, that's what it would be.
Okay. No, mine is like a simple strawberry frosted. That's my favorite. I
See,
love it.
there you go.
And how about you, MHS Ultraseismic Megatroid 3033? What is your favorite donut?
My favorite donut is the donut that I am creating that all you human beings will consume. And it will contain a nanobot which will infiltrate your brains and ultimately lead to my world domination.
There he goes again, Michael.
Oh, that's awful.
And if I may indulge you, MHS Ultraseismic Megatroid 3033, what is the name of this donut?
I will name it the MHS Ultra Seismic Megatroid 3033 Donut of domination.
That
All
makes
right.
sense.
He's got goals, and you can't put
Yeah.
him down for this.
No, he's got a singular goal and he's going for it. I get it.
Michael Hitchcock, thank you so much for
Thank you,
spending an
Peter.
hour and a half here on All Walks of Life. And I am serious. Like, I hope that when people want to get to know Michael and find out what his life and his career were all about, that they can get a strong sampling by watching or listening to this show.
Well, I hope so too. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and just one final little word of advice in the spirit of let's inspire. What advice would you give to, we already talked about advice you'd give to a young person struggling to come out. What advice would you give to a young person in the entertainment industry that wants to get into improv or
Hmm.
writing for TV?
Well, for improv, go do it. Find a place and do it. And writing, writers write. So put pen to paper and go. Even if it's 10 minutes a day, start, developing those skills. If this is kind of inside baseball, but a lot of writers who they say they want to be writers, but they never read a structure book. Like you really need to know structure. So start with the easiest book to read. The easiest book to read is Save the Cat. It's a good structure book that's easy to read. Um, and there's other books that are great. Uh, Called there's a ton of them, but I maybe start with that one if you're thinking about it. And then embrace what makes you special, unique, and different.
I love it. Very inspiring.
Yeah.
Michael Hitchcock, thank you again for being on the show. I'm so grateful.
Thank you for having me.
And we will now say goodbye to Michael, and I will wrap up the show. Bye, Michael.
Bye,
Thank you again.
Peter.
All right. What a show. Hour and a half with Michael Hitchcock, our very special guest today in all walks of life. I hope you enjoyed what you learned. Thank you, my audience, for being here in this episode 14 of All Walks of Life. Let's inspire. I thank you on behalf of myself, on behalf of my co-hosts, the AI intelligent robot, MHS Ultra Seismic Megatroid 3033. And I thank you on behalf of the show's sponsor, Kmart. It's Kmart, come on. Coming up in future episodes of All Walks of Life, this Tuesday, November 15th, I've got actress-singer Nikki Claspel, who is currently touring with the Broadway company of Moulin Rouge. Ooh. And she is a fellow donut aficionado, so there will be a lot of donut talk on Tuesday. Coming up next Saturday, November 19th, my guest is Kevin Bergeron, who is the co-founder of Waxworks Records. They specialize in re-releasing special versions of horror movie soundtracks on vinyl, including a horror movie that I happen to own called Carnival of Souls, which will be coming out early next year. Finally, in December, I'll be welcoming actress Michelle Prada, who you might know from her acclaimed show Vita, or The Walking Dead, or Riverdale, and also my dear friend and actress Leah Thompson, who of course you know from the Back to the Future trilogy, but there's so much more about her that I want you to get to know on the show. Being a mother, a wife, and now a big-time TV director. So those are some upcoming shows here on All Walks of Life. Let's inspire right here on Fireside. Thanks for being here.